I'm Dr. Pete Economo, the East Coast psychologist,
And I'm Dr. Nikki Rubin, the West Coast psychologist.
and this is When East.
Meets West.
Do you know that in 2016, the US video game marketing was at almost $18 billion, Nikki?
I did not know that. That is a lot of money.
And 65% of American adults are video gamers.
Yeah, well, I am aware that it is. It's video games are not going away. People like gamers. I mean, it's a whole.
Quite the
it's
opposite.
A whole, yeah, it's a whole culture. I mean, people.
Yeah.
There's like tournaments. There are people that make a living. Actually, it's like athletes, right? Like they're.
It's like athletes. So today we're going to discuss video games, and I believe. Well, Nikki, I mean, well, because. What? Is it always, there's such a negative connotation around video gaming. Do you think like parents are worried about video games, or, it's like, I used to walk to school barefoot. Like is that like our culture, this generation's, cross to bear? Like what's happening?
It's interesting because I think that this is a generational issue because, Pete and I, as we've mentioned many times, I think we always get upset because we're like, we're not millennials. We were once called Gen Y. I think the term that I think resonates with this is the Zennials, right? The small window between.
I'm an elder millennial, and
it's the same. You like, yeah. So the other term, it's like the small window between.
I'm wise.
Yes, between millennials and Gen X, and so I think when we were kids growing up, like our parents' generation, there was a lot of concern because video games came into being in like the late 70s, early 80s. So like Pong and stuff like that. But I think that now like with Gen X, people like say in their 50s, right, or late 40s or whatever, and their kids, those folks had video. I don't know, they were more exposed. So I don't know. I think,
but not at this level. I mean, it wasn't. It's on. There's. How many devices are connected to Wi-Fi in one's household right now in today's world?
Right. But I think that's different than video games. So I think like maybe the shift has become like concern about devices, whereas video games, I think, I don't know if there's as much.
Well, hold on a second. Them. Do you play video games?
I do not. I mean, I have played them. I have, but I'll say, so again, it's a generational thing. In my house, we weren't, because of, again, it's like in the 80s and 90s, we weren't really allowed to have them. Like we didn't have, I remember when we got Game Boy, that was like a big deal. And we were limited on when we were playing Game Boy. And then we had like,
did you have
whatever
Nintendo?
to say, not until I was in high school. And it was like when, it was like the first James Bond, the 007, remember that but actually interestingly, because that we had like the little Sega one that was like a Game Boy. Yeah, I remember playing Sonic or whatever. And we go to friends' houses and but my parents were like, you could play whatever, but we're not going to use it a lot. And because of that, both my brother and I, neither of us ever really like.
Well, the only reason I said that, my judgment, was because people game on all devices. So it's not just like, there's no console needed.
Oh, right now it is totally right.
So
totally right. Yeah.
You reminded me of a show I watched recently on, I don't know, Hulu or something. And the little girl was like, I think it's called Get Home Before It's Dark Out on Hulu. And the girl saw a VCR player and she didn't know what it was.
Oh my God.
And then she YouTubed how to connect it. So,
well, of course, now I want to now I'm having the urge to just like reminisce about all the, Pete and I are of the generation of Oregon Trail.
Yes, we are.
Did you play Oregon Trail?
Oregon Trail.
Play that at school?
Well, we played
Lemonade Stand. Remember that?
No, I don't know that one.
Oh my God, there's one called Lemonade Stand. Which, guess what, guys? Guess what the game was? Selling lemonade. That was the game.
Someone got paid a lot of money to do that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
No, as you might imagine, in my house, any games we had were sports.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
And I will say, and I'll disclose this, that I never really liked video games. I wasn't good at them, and that's probably why I didn't like them. And
it's good at most things, just for everybody listening. So, which is true. It's not just that's absolutely true.
And looking back, like in hindsight, I found myself frustrated playing all the time because I couldn't truly control the player, because it was like this, like your fingers were doing it, and I have good hand-eye coordination, especially for a former swimmer, because a lot of them don't. But all right, so I was just I started this with this like inclination or this assumption that people negatively look at it today, because I do think when I hear parents talking about their kids in session, they're worried about how much time they're playing with it. Mm-hmm. They're worried if they're losing that interpersonal connection.
Yeah, sure.
The sociability of it. what parents don't realize is that they are socializing during it almost 9 times out of 10 right now.
Right. There's like is now there people play like with others across the world, right?
All
There's
over
like
the place.
yeah, it's all over the place. Yeah. Well, and I think this comes back to like this idea too of like, Pete and I talk a lot sort of like the simplest way to say it is like the everything in moderation, right?
That's
it's
right.
like, right. So if we start by letting go of judgment about it, it's like, okay, like this is an activity that someone may or may not enjoy. If they enjoy it, it's like, okay, well then now let's start to assess, like, why do you enjoy it? Like, how often are you playing it? Like, what's the impact? And it's just, from a behavioral lens, like, the function of a behavior is going to vary based on the context. Like, is somebody playing 15 hours a day and, not going outside and not taking care of their home and not interacting with, any people. Okay, well, that's an example of like, we might be curious and say like, that might not be workable.
Right.
Is somebody, well, but I don't know, is there somebody playing 7 hours a day and they're making, it's a business for them and they're like, a rising star in the gamer world, like, and they're really successful and they're feeling really confident. Okay, well, maybe that's totally healthy, right?
Well, there you are with your dialectic. Thank you.
Yes, there. You're welcome. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Nikki, for that. Well, and there, people often try and make this connection of like the gamer who's playing the shooting games is the one that's coming out to these, mass shootings. And I don't know if we even have data on that. I know in 2016, almost 30% of all games sold were shooter games. So like, is that impacting? Who knows? Because from a behavioral perspective, it's chicken or egg. And so sometimes it's that predisposed personality that lends itself towards those shooter games.
Right.
And maybe they would be shooting up anyway. Or like, is that shooter game having an impact and having impact on the formalizing of that part of the brain? Do we know?
No, well, I mean, I think that's such a great point. And I think maybe also, and I do know that they study this stuff. I'm just unfortunately not at all familiar with the details of the research, but it's like, I think where there can be a lot of questions and concerns is on like the age of the participant in the games, right? So it's like, we do know it's like young children, we'll back up. Brains grow until like mid to late 20s for human beings, right? So that's actually, most people don't know that. It's like, that's a long time for brain development. So,
well, and with neuroplasticity, it can grow and change until we die.
Well, it can change, yes, but like in terms of like reaching your height, growth, it stops growing. Like it reaches its full like human adult maturity in your mid to late 20s. So a young brain, like a 5-year-old, a 14-year-old, right? Yeah. Like seeing, especially nowadays, it's like, again, with Pete and I's generation, like, we thought it was like Sonic was like really cool. It's like a cartoon, right? Like, wow, these colors are amazing. It's like now some of these video games, it's like the quality is almost like watching a movie or something.
Or
better. So I think like it's knowing the impact of seeing extremely detailed, intense imagery that a young brain can't tolerate. And actually what's coming to my mind, interestingly enough, which we'll probably do an episode on this, it's like what they were trying to study in terms of like the impact of like teenagers' access to pornography.
Sure.
Right. So it's like seeing very intense imagery with a brain that might actually not be able to yet effectively tolerate or process it. And so I think that's maybe sometimes the question, like if a 6-year-old is looking at a very realistic depiction of violence, like how is that impacting the brain? I think that's an important question to ask.
It's a great question. And we don't know because we still are learning so much about neurology. It comes to my mind is that actually growing up, a neighborhood friend of ours had a seizure during Sonic, as you mentioned that one.
Oh, because of the flashing lights?
Because of the flashing lights. And so also like just trying to, we're not trying to scare people as they're listening to this or listeners, but that certainly neurologically that the vividness and the clarity in which these devices are displaying, all characters or just the environment is so real that maybe our brains can't tell the difference.
Well, and I think this is, kind of begins to step into virtual reality, right? So like these ideas of like when you're immersed
define that for
in
folks,
a game. Well, so, types of games or experiences, and I forget, what's it called? Oculus, is that the name of it? The one, I think it's Oculus. I have actually a friend who works in virtual reality. I should have asked her. So I think it's like really like you wear these lenses. So
well,
the
everyone
brain.
has seen one of those videos.
Yeah,
I actually love those videos. We have like someone's grandparent with the goggles on, and they're like, flipping the TV or the table over or falling.
Right. And so it's like, because the brain is then being immersed in a virtual world, right? And so, like, obviously in some ways that's really, it can be really fun for people and really interesting, and you can have experiences that could never exist in the physical world. Though, I'm a real big fan of the show Black Mirror. Do you watch? Yeah, do you watch Black Mirror, Pete?
No, I don't.
Oh, well,
I need to.
Yeah,
that's my second show you gave me today.
Yeah. So it's on Netflix. I like weird dystopian novels and shows. I don't know why it's weird. Such an optimistic person. Yeah,
but we'll go into that.
We'll go into that another time. Yeah, but so there's a lot of episodes where they explore sort of like the impact of technology, and there's some episodes about virtual reality and like what that might mean of like if we can access those. It's like there's a lot of like ethical questions too about and some people prefer to be in those worlds than the real world. So it's like, what does that mean?
Well, I'll say to that is that's one of the main benefits of video games, because say people with autism have been able to practice social skills in a more safe setting, and so that's definitely one of the benefits. I'll list some others just based on research: mental stimulation, feeling accomplished, social interaction. It can be, again, I think people think we're isolating, but really it can help to foster emotional resilience. It could be, but in order to really like use video games towards well-being, there's some strategies which are important, and that means being strategic with video games. So like Nikki, you said before, having some kind of limits on them is going to be critical. Playing with friends is a big piece of also, fostering that, well-being. And then not, if you like, one of the key things for parents to maybe look at, or for kids, is like, if they're feeling anxious while they're playing, unable to sleep whenever it's disrupting the sleep, or if they're like avoiding social settings, that's where maybe you want to like intervene and like really assess the video game usage.
Yeah. So again, it sounds like you're really laying out some guidelines to, as we always recommend here, it's like starting from a place of like curiosity and just like really openly assessing in a non-judgmental way, like what's actually happening, like get the data about like, what is the usage? What is their experience socially? And also like, what's the impact? Does the person seem, I would say like, is the person seem like a better version of themselves, right? Like why we wouldn't want to limit that behavior, or do they?
Because I was the one that was throwing the controller, so I mean, if things are breaking in the room, or
I'm just laughing because it's like I said, it really is true, and I mean this. One thing I always so admire, Pete really is good at most things. Like he really is. He's really good at so many things. So we laugh like you're like, I'm not good at this. I do not like this game.
I don't like it.
I would
only two things that you're
Pete,
good at.
Yeah, only two. Oh, it's very adorable.
I'm gonna I want to also just share a quick story, because one of the things that we're doing now in my research lab is so e-games, as Nikki alluded to in the beginning, it's becoming it's a sport. There's actually talk about it being an Olympic sport. It has become a varsity sport. There are people who are professionally e-gamers, and so if you've ever seen, which I've now been able to see, like some of these, I guess they call them like technology rooms, or where there's just a whole bunch of screens where it's pretty, and with like these headphones, so you can really you could be gaming in a room with 20 other people, but each on your own screen.
Oh, wow.
Talk about stimulus overload.
Yeah. Well, for me, at least that would be, but
me too.
But not for everybody. Some people are really skilled in navigating that.
And so one of the things we're doing is we teamed up with an esports league here in New Jersey. And there's a program that they've developed called EPIC, which is a social emotional learning and mindfulness-based program to help gamers, both develop social emotional learning as well as skills towards mindful performance.
So I think, and I want to make sure we, of course, bring in some Eastern mindfulness concepts in this. And I'm glad you're saying that. I think this is an important example of we can practice mindfulness with literally any behavior. So, again, people love to sort of like buy into the myth that mindfulness is like meditating on a mountaintop, right? And I'll say like, sure, you can be mindful meditating on a mountaintop. You can also be, I say people like, you can mindfully watch television. You can mindfully play video games. Like all mindfulness means is paying attention to and experiencing the moment that you're in. That's all it is.
Without judgment.
Without judgment. Right. Right. So it's like whatever thing you're doing,
just do
you can do with awareness and presence,
That's right. Yeah. So I'm hoping this was helpful for people. We're just going to break down a little bit about video games. There's good and bad, like Dr. Nikki's favorite thing there, the dialectic, and
helpful and unhelpful, I would say.
Much better. So thank you for breaking that down. But really, just recognize: are your kids, or are you still playing with curiosity? Have you set limits, and are you committed to a healthy way or mindfully playing video games?
This has been When East Meets West. I'm Dr. Pete Economo.
And I'm Dr. Nikki Rubin. Be present, be brave.
This has been When East Meets West. All material is based on opinion and educational training of Drs. Pete Economo and Nikki Rubin.
Content is for informational and educational purposes only.